Hello, everybody. My name is Zain Nayani, and I'm the founder of Zain Advisory. And today we are here to talk about how to create budgets. As we're talking about this whole topic, what we want to think about is this is more related to decision makers in Indigenous government, so councils, leadership, managers thought about it from their perspective. The first question that kind of comes to mind is always, why am I here? Where do I even start? Good community plan, you've got something out there, but you're struggling to figure out, how do you bring life to that? How do you make things really happen? And if you're one of those people who are struggling with that kind of thought, this conversation is essentially for you. And what we want to try and cover in this conversation today is three things. One, what's a budget? Why it's needed? How do you create budgets at an organizational level? And again, zooming into an Indigenous government and Indigenous community setting. And then some frequently asked questions. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But there is a bonus thing that we are offering today about misconceptions. So there is that. We'll cover that as well. Getting into the first topic, what's a budget? Why is it important? When I think about what's a budget, it's really nothing. It's a plan that is expressed in financial terms, that is expressed in numbers, right? And that usually is about a period of 12 months. When I think about a budget from an organizational perspective, a budget is something that helps bring life into plans that an organization can have, but they're not restricted to an organizational level. You can get into program level, you can have budgets for projects, initiatives, programs in the community. So that's just quick rough idea about what a budget is. Why do you need it? Why create budgets? And the idea is a long list, but the key idea that I want people to focus on is accountability. Budget is nothing but a plan expressed in numbers. It's something that can be measured. If you've got a budget in place, you can monitor your performance against what your plan was, right? So you can look at how things are moving as you move along in an organization, in a project's life, really to understand how much into the budget we did a particular line item within your organization. So it's really there as a yardstick. It's there to be used as a yardstick to control the actions of an organization. First, plan it. You implement it. When you get into the implementation, that's where budget becomes a real key controlling document. So what are some of the misconceptions that are out there? There are quite a few. Just going to cover some. Number one that comes to mind is budgets are set in stone. They can't be changed. They're not. They're flexible pieces of information that can always change if there's a rationale for it. So that's one. It's time consuming. It's not if you put in the right team and you've got access to the right information. It's really not. It can be done very efficient way. It's there. How budgeting gets done. It's out there. It's about bringing the right people on the team. Must be good at math or accounting. The answer again is no. You don't have to be a mathematician or an accountant to know budgeting. We've got computers, tools for that. You don't need to know how to turn computer on, use Excel, basic applications that can help create budgets. What needs to be really thought about is if you can help develop a plan, if you can express a plan, you can learn how to create a budget. It's restrictive. Again, it's not. It's very flexible. Budgeting is part of managerial accounting, really, right? So it's not set in stone. It's really flexible tool. It can be adapted to the needs of an organization, to the needs of a project, program, or service. It's all in my head. Well, that's fantastic. Put it on paper, put it on spreadsheet, however you want, so that it's more visual and can be shared with other people to collaborate on. I don't make much income, or it doesn't really matter. You probably make something, you have some expenses, let's sit down. Because again, it serves as that yardstick to measure your performance as you move forward. Effective budgeting, when you think about that as a term, what does that really mean? Is you've got an organization that has some sort of a structure, but a structure that is hierarchical, you've got a circular structure, whatever that looks like, have to have that structure. The organization has access to research, to information within your organization to understand how things are working, analyze the data that exists in the organization to know really how your organization has done over the last little while so that you can start thinking about the plan for the next little while. And the third key theme when we think about effective budgeting is just acceptance, every level of your organization, really. So, you've got leaders, they need to endorse the process of budgeting, have a plan. This is how long it's going to take. These are the people who are going to be sitting on the committee to do this thing. Managers, your program staff, project managers, whoever is part of your organization, get them all on board on the process. Otherwise, it becomes a bit of a failure. Another key question that comes to mind is how long is it going to take to complete the process of budgeting? Short and sweet answer to that is it depends. It depends on the size of the organization and the people who are part of that conversation. But really, when we think about a realistic budgeting process takes about 6 months to get it done and get it done right. Why? Because there is that it's a phased approach, right? You want to spend some time engaging the community. That's the key thing. When you talk with people about this is what we've done over the last little while, this is what we still need to do in the next little while. Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Really engaging the community, talking about the revenues that you have as a community, as an organization. What are your own source revenues? What are your grant revenues? What are your program revenues? All of that really comes in. Also looking at the expense side of things. How much does it cost to operate all the programs? How much does it cost to run a project? Are there any capital projects? All of that comes under this category where you start thinking about how the needs of the community are going to translate into planning for the expenses. And then the last piece that comes to mind is always bringing it together, drafting, reviewing the final versions, approving, getting the approvals from the leadership, from the community members, sharing the information, and opening it up for a conversation. And you put all of this into perspective. Well, the first couple of months is about engaging the community in whatever way they having a plan. It makes sense to engage the community. It then gets done in a more structured way. But in that first couple of months dedicated towards that. Third month, getting to the revenue sources, just trying to understand, hey, where the money is going to come from, what are our options, how much can we actually spend? Because money is the limiting factor. It's often times that we create budgets just for the limiting factors. After forecasting the revenues, you get into expenditure, right? That's where I spend the fourth month trying to think about, well, what are my operating expenses? What are my capital needs? We working with the teams, creating all of that. And then the last couple of months is to just review what you've developed, bring it all together in form of a package for the leadership to understand, presenting it to them in whatever way that works for your particular organization, and seeking approvals and sharing the news with communities, the organization. So that process, if you look at it, it's about 6 months if you do it right. And that's essentially, again, getting into the details here. But when you think about engaging community, what are some of the questions that we can ask, right? And again, how we engage the community as many ways as possible, that's not relevant. What's relevant is engaging the community in the first couple of months and asking the questions through those conversations, electronic, one-on-one, phone conversations, keeping it diverse so that there is maximum input provided into that, but understanding, hey, this is what we've done over the last little while. This is what we need to do. Does it make sense to you? And if it does, then you start looking at, well, the next thing, which is your revenues. And when we think about Indigenous governments, Indigenous communities, bands, their revenues are often broken down into three key categories. And what are those categories? So own source revenues, these are revenues that the nation has for itself because, they are a government, so they have different revenue streams. Then proposal based with other forms of governments, the provincial government, the federal government, working with them, corporate donors out there, corporate philanthropists out there who you can apply to and get proposal based revenue sources. for specific projects, programs, and initiatives, and you've got certain ongoing programs and services in the community that are essential for the community to be a thriving community, a resilient community. Basic things like maintenance of roads infrastructure, water infrastructure, home infrastructure, provision of education services, health services, all of that is part of programs and services funding. And there's often you work with different levels of government, federal and provincial, to create that kind of the funding there. But really understanding the revenue sources, different revenue sources, simply by listing it down, your goals in there. Once you know how much money you've got, you can start thinking about, okay, well, hey, these are the needs of the community based on that first couple of months of engagement. If you've done it right, you've planned that engagement, you've done it in a structured way, you know precisely what needs to be planned for. And bringing some structure to that is just maybe creating some sort of a spreadsheet, some sort of a tabulation where you really can understand the projects that you're seeing through the vertical columns. It says water line, solar, subdivision, roads. These are different projects. These are different programs within an organization. You've estimated already the different revenue sources for it, right? That was the previous step. But really looking at the expenditure and breaking it down, like what are the needs to advance this particular project? What are the needs to advance this particular program or service? And understanding if we are short of money or if it will end up having a lot of money for this project. And if that's the case, then you do the math, you think about, well, is this project really necessary or not? Or the resources can be then reallocated to other things. So that's the conversation that happens right at the core part of entire budget process, the third and the fourth months. But then what happens at the end is just bringing it all together, right? Working with the different departments to pull their programs into a bit of a compendium, a bit of a manual that you can share with your leadership to say, hey, these are the details of all the different programs and services we plan to do, our different business entities, our different nonprofit organizations, everything presented in a way that people can understand, give that room to really think it through, talk about, reflect on it, have that discussion, debate, conversations about really making sure that it makes sense to the people who are accountable to create plans and implement these sorts of plans. This particular step happens in our space in about February, March. Most fiscal years run from April to March, and that's where this kind of thing comes in around February and March. So this is the bonus step that I've just kind of thrown in there. What comes after? And that's often another key thing, and maybe it's a conversation topic for another time. But really, what it is well, you've created a plan, you've expressed that plan into numbers, your budget, and then it's a matter of implementing that plan, right? Really taking it on a day-to-day basis, start doing the things that you've planned and keeping a system of it, right? So this is where accounting, bookkeeping comes in very, very quietly and takes all the different transactions that are happening within your organization and put them into the right, we looked at the pillars, right? Profit centers, right? Places where you can see how your programs and services are working, how your projects are working, and as an organization, how you're working on a month-to-month basis, on a quarter-by-quarter basis, on a budget, on a biannual and annual basis. So that's where this is a whole different conversation. But with respect to budgeting, let's look at some frequently asked questions that we've kind of received, and let's go. So this is the fun part. Oh, I'm not good with numbers, or I'm intimidated by spreadsheets. What's my advice for people who are new to this process and feel overwhelmed or start slow? I think maybe take something like bookkeeping, build that capacity, work with a mentor. And I think those are things that can build up. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be good with numbers or spreadsheet for that matter. Another question, well, what if we don't know or can't estimate? I think the right thing here is to work as a team, right? Bringing in people who can potentially support with the technical knowledge, with the organizational knowledge, bringing people, the right people into that conversation, bringing funders in. I think that's where these sorts of conversations could go. What if things change? Well, I think it's more about keeping budgets flexible, right? If something changes as budgets are being implemented, we'll know that budgets are flexible, right? They're not set in stone. So it can always change as long as there's a rationale, something behind it. That's basically it. And yes, thank you again for listening to us. And if you need help, give us a shout at the email address right there.